All right, good morning, everyone. So, if you are at home today, so you're a part of cohort 2, then this is the video that you'll be watching. Don't worry though, even though we're not going to go over those problems that some of you had questions about yesterday, we are going to go over them tomorrow when I see you in person. I just figured it was a lot better to talk about those when I see you face to face as opposed to trying to address some of your questions through a video. So, what this video is going to address is what is a class and what does it do, and how does it, how do they work? So the idea for most of what we've seen so far in Java is most of the time all the stuff has been filled in for us as far as the class declaration and everything. But if you notice on my screen here, right, we have the class declaration as the first line. It's very easy, public class, and then the name of the class, whatever that is. In this case, it's my program, right? I think in Replit, I believe it's just called main. In BlueJ, you have to give it a name. So depending on what software you use, it's a little bit different. And then for the most part, you can hear my dog coming down the stairs right now. Here, this part has been filled in for us as well. This static void main, our main method, right? This houses everything that we want to do as far as all of our command calls and everything. So all of that's been given to us. The idea in Java is that a class is just an organizational method. It stores information about objects. And that's the key thing, that classes help us create objects. So for instance, in the example we're going to go through today, a class could represent a student and house information about that student, their schedule, their GPA, their grades, what grade they're in, their age, all this different stuff. So I think a really easy example to think about is something like PowerSchool, right? There was a student class in the back end of PowerSchool that creates a student object, right? And it houses your information, your parents' information, your address, your schedule, your grades, what bus you take, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's used, and then every time a new student comes to Cheshire High School, or every time a class graduates, right, we either add students to the directory or we take them away. But we're still using that same basic structure because every student comes with the same basic information, right? So I think the easiest way to kind of explain how to go about creating a class and what's involved is just to run through an example. So depending on what software you're using, again, on Replit, it's going to look very similar to this, right? I'm going to click New File, and it's going to prompt me to enter a file name. So this is going to be student.java. Add file. Now notice, it's already pre-filled in a whole bunch of things for me here, right? It's already filled in the class declaration with the name. So one very, very important thing, right? This must match the file name. Right, if I try to make this a lowercase s, and even if I press run right now, I get an error message, right? It says class student is public, declared, must be declared in file name lowercase student.java. So very important thing here, your class name here and your file name over here need to match perfectly. Now I'm going to get rid of this because I don't want a public static void main in this particular class. So the very first thing that a class comes with are called instance variables, right? So those are the first things that are declared. Now we're going to write a really, really basic class here. So for a student, it's just going to come with two things, right? A private integer that represents their grade and a private string that represents their name. Now, remember, these are called instance variables. I apologize for how loud my keyboard is. The key with instance variables are they are just attributes that each object comes with, right? Every student is going to come with a grade and a name. These are always going to be private for our purposes, right? For the purposes of our class, they're always going to be private, which means they can't be directly accessed or changed from another class. So what that means is once I create a student, Again, think about the PowerSchool example. Your name and your grade are private, meaning any teacher in the building just can't go in and change your name in the system, right? Specific people have to have specific access to be able to modify that, right? So if you think about a teacher view or your view of PowerSchool, right, you can't just change the grade you're in manually, right? Because it's private to the student class. It cannot be modified outside of the student class itself. So only an administrator can change all of that stuff for you, right? So for our purposes, for every class you write for the AP exam, for every class we will write in class, they will always be private instance variables. In the real world, in terms of real things that really happen, that's not always the case, right? And we'll talk about instances of that as well. The next thing that comes with a class is called a constructor, right? So this thing that I just wrote right here is called a constructor. What it does is it sets the values of your instance variable, right? So this will set the values of your instance variables. Here comes my other dog down the stairs, right? So in here, let's say by default, every time I create a student, they're going to be a freshman. So in here, I will say grade equals 9, name equals, I don't know your name, right? So I'm not going to give you one. Notice that this constructor doesn't take parameters. It looks a lot like a method, right? The difference is it has no return type. You notice that there's no int, string, whatever there may be, right? It's just public student. But also, again, important thing, I know I said it before, I'll say it again, it needs to match exactly the name of your class, because this constructor creates the object by setting these values. Another important thing is that you can have more than one. I could create another one, right, that takes parameters, right? And so I can say grade equals the integer parameter, name equals n, the string parameter, right? So you're allowed to have more than one. The difference is they can't take the same exact parameters. This one doesn't take any, so I would call this like the default case, right? Like I'm not sure about this person, so I'm just going to create an object so I can change it later. This second one is I know exactly the thing. Whoops, this should be a comma. That would be a problem, right? So again, this is still a constructor. These are both constructors, both just for slightly different examples, right? These are what create your object because they set the value of the instance variables. That is the most important thing. What comes after this now are just some methods, right? So I can create a public string, let's call it getName. You'll see these as well oftentimes. This is just going to return name, right? This is called an accessor method because it allows access to your instance variables. Remember, these were private, so I could not directly get it if I created a student object in a different class, right? This method, though, I can call because it's public, and then I can get the name of that particular student using it. So sometimes instead of accessors, these are also called getter methods, right? So we have getters and then we have setters that allow you to set the value of instance variables, right? So now I'm going to create another one of these for the grade, public int get grade. And this is just going to return grade. So again, it's the same idea. Both of these methods allow me access to my two private instance variables that exist up here, right? The other type of method that we have is called a setter, or the more specific term, a mutator. So I'm going to create a public void set name and a public void set grade. right? Now, these often take parameters. Right, we'll call this string new name. We'll call this int new grade. And what these allow me to do, right, these are called mutators or setters. Now I can change the instance variables just by using this parameter. So here I can say name equals new name. And the same thing down here, I can say grade equals new grade. The idea, a couple of things. One, the reason why these are void return types is that I don't need to return name from here. I can return name using getName, right? So mutators most often are going to be void return types because I don't actually want to return name. I just want to change where the value is stored in this class. So you have officially written your first class, looking at it this way. So what this does, big picture, is it creates a student object. And so to show you a little bit about how that works, right, I'm going to go into my main MyProgram class. So I want to create a student, and if you remember, if I wanted to create a string, right, let's just say I'm going to call it string John equals John, right? So I have the object type, its name, and then whatever I want to initialize it to be. So if I wanted to create a student named John, it's very similar, but instead of having just the initialization being those quotation marks, because it's an object, I'm going to say new student, and then, right, I need to go back to the student class because I need to remember what order did I put these parameters in. So John is in 9th grade, and his name is John. So what this did is this just created a student object. Grade was 9, name John. That's what that did. So now if I press run, right, hopefully we don't get any error messages. Perfect, right? Nothing happened, obviously, because I didn't print anything. But yeah. So if I wanted to do something now to this, I can call some of these methods, right? So I can say like string name equals John dot get name, and then I can print out name, and this should work. I mean, let's see here. Perfect, right? It prints John. It's exactly what I want. I can now do, if I want, right, John dot set name Joe, and now if I say the same thing here, name equals John dot get name, and then I print it out, it should print out Joe, and it does. So I know this part might be a little bit confusing. We will talk significantly more about this, and then how do I create an object, and what do I do, and how do I use these methods, and what is this syntax. We will get a lot more into that tomorrow when I see you guys in person. I just wanted to give you the basic intro to what is a class, what is involved, what do I need, and how does it all work. So I'm just going to leave a short little thing for you guys to write for today, and then I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, guys. See you later.